For years, we've been afraid of them. Now it's time for them to be afraid of us.
We need to hold those terrorist rebels accountable. They need to be reminded who they're dealing with.
We can't just let them win.
Mayday's working on a plan to kill extremist commanders.
If you want to fight, then let's fight together.
God has a plan for me, and I cannot hide from his plan anymore.
We broke this country, and now we have to fix it together.
This is Gilead. The only person you should count on is yourself.
I am trying to give you a way out.
There is no way out.
How many bodies are you gonna throw in the fire? When is enough enough?
When there's no one left to fight.
We're just two lunatics going into Gilead on a wing and a prayer.
They will never see us coming.
Oh, hell no.
Blessed be the fruit.
Let the revolution begin.
We may be beyond saving, but we gotta try.
Sometimes I think you're the only good thing in my life.
I built this miserable hellscape.
This is the beginning of the end. What's happening?
Rebellion.
Rise up and fight for your freedom.
Where is June Osborne?
This lie's gonna land you on the wall.
I still got my daughter!
You're just like the rest of them.
We use all of our friends, everyone and anyone who hates Gilead, to finally declare enough.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Writer's Room with The Handmaid's Tale, presented by Hulu. I'm Stacey Wilson Hunt, contributing editor at The Hollywood Reporter. Please welcome creator, executive producer, and writer Bruce Miller.
Hello.
Hi. Executive producer, co-showrunner, and writer Yahlin Chang. Hello. And executive producer, co-showrunner, and writer Eric Tuchman. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had chills again, even though I've seen the final season twice and I'm still recovering. I imagine you have the same feeling. How does it feel to see that sizzle now?
It's a little slightly different. I mean, Lizzie always talked about the fact that there was an aspect of I'm getting sucked into this show and an aspect of, oh, look what I did over my summer vacation. I remember that day. And so there's always that mix of things. How do you guys, I mean, it's wonderful, but also you really do remember a much more convivial part of a lot of moments, you know, of people hugging and saying goodbye. So.
Oh. And obviously some time has passed. The finale aired in May. Feels like a lifetime ago. I don't know how it feels to you, but it just feels so long ago because so much has happened in the world. But I want to ask, now that you've had some time for it to digest a little bit, Yahlin, how do you feel about the way the show ended and what you were able to achieve for this incredible conclusion?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm just so proud of everything that we accomplished. I'm overwhelmed with gratitude to Bruce and Eric and the cast and the crew and everyone involved with Handmaids in the studio and the network for supporting us. And I'm still reeling from the fact, Stacey, that you watched the whole season twice. That's just real dedication.
You know, I have to say it's in my bones.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still really proud. Like, it's very unusual. I've been a TV writer for 25 years to sort of have a plan and a vision and then to actually see it through to fruition and to have it result in a product that you're happy with. And you know, always working on this show, we have such amazing artists all the way up and down that call sheet and the crew list. So to the very, you know, to the PA on the set and to the prop master who's, you know, putting things in drawers, everyone was so passionate about the show and so respectful of it and respectful of the stories that we were telling that, you know, I always felt like people were saving, like as the writers, as people sort of at the beginning of the process, I was always like, thank God for, Adam Taylor, the composer, he's saving our ass. He saved our ass in this scene. I felt like we were constantly getting our asses saved by the brilliant artists that worked with us,
It is an incredible crew of people. And Bruce, when you think back to your first conversations with your colleagues here about the way you wanted to end the show, what was your biggest goal in terms of the larger storytelling? And what were things that you wanted to avoid? Because I know that's also a main concern.
Well, a couple of things. I think, I think our attitude, or my attitude going into it the whole way through, was first do no harm. Hippocrates. And that's because I liked the book so much. You don't want to mess up the book in the adaptation to the point where no one wants to read the book. Clan of the Cave Bear, I'm sure people aren't running out to buy. So you want to do something that's going to kind of be, so once you kind of get your head around that you want to do something that's in service of the book, you can look at the way the book goes along, the way the book ends, the way most stories end in the book. And because you don't want to turn it into something it isn't at the end. But you also, as Yahlin said, we don't get to do this very often. This is unusual for us. We actually started this not knowing where we were going to end. I mean, we had ideas. So what you really want to do is, as we looked, I felt as we looked to the book to start our journey, you look to how the book ended and how those stories wrapped up or didn't wrap up at the end of the book, which I felt like taking advice from Margaret Atwood as a storyteller. I mean, honestly, I'm not being glib, really did. We had have a good reason to divert from that. And that's I think one of the core things. And these guys really, had a lot of, I think a lot of freedom. I hope you guys felt like they had a lot of freedom. And I certainly loved what they were doing. So I wasn't going to step in. But I think you want to start from a core, as Yahlin said, you want to be able to talk to every single person on the crew and say it's about motherhood. And then everybody's working off the same page. So
That's so great. And Eric, to you, what are the hallmarks of a great series conclusion? And how do you feel that Handmaid's Tale reflected some of those great milestones and hallmarks that to you really help wrap up a series? Because it's a very, very delicate process.
It is. We had so many discussions about how to conclude the show, but I think the thing that we always kept in mind is just to be honest and authentic to who these people and these characters were and what the situations were. I know that people say that a great ending is both surprising and inevitable, and I think that's what Bruce really achieved. It's difficult to please everybody when you're wrapping up a show, but I think the show really ended in exactly the right way. It's called The Handmaid's Tale. It's about a woman reflecting on her experience and sharing her experience. So of course, you're going to come full circle at the end of the show. I don't want to ruin anything if anyone hasn't seen the finale, but that felt like the right ending. It felt like the right conclusion to this story.
I totally agree. And I think it fed enough to the fans, the diehard fans who are very passionate, as you know, but it also, I think to your point, really kept the integrity of the original story and Margaret's writing. I am biased, but I really think it's one of the great series finales of all time. I think you did a wonderful job.
Nice.
And Yahlin,
I watched a ton of them. We watched a ton of them, or I watched a ton of them. So Northern Exposure was great. Sorry.
And David Lindelof and David Chase also, of course, had their own, journeys through the finale experience, both of which I really enjoyed as well. And Yahlin, I'd like to know which character for you became the most fun to write for in ways that you didn't anticipate over the run of the series.
I mean, I have to choose two. They're both villains. Serena and Commander Lawrence were so fun for me to write because it was so fun to just imaginatively embrace such, like in Serena's case, such selfishness and self-absorption, and evil, and for Commander Lawrence to be able to sort of just step into his just incredible obliviousness and arrogance, so I don't know, I find that it's just so much more fun to write villains, I guess, because also those actors are so amazing. They made them so human, and I felt like those characters were so, it's not that they were inhuman, they were all too human. They were so driven by their very basic human selfish impulses. You know, for Commander Lawrence, it was to see himself as the savior of the world, you know, and, you know, human rights be damned. And for Serena, it was that like hunger to have a child, and that hunger, and also to be recognized and to be like a great person, you know, to be like a VIP. And so it was in a way embracing their kind of basis humanity that was so fun. And then also like they just get to say and do things that as a civilized person in the world today, you don't get to say and do, you know? So like, you know, can do pretty horrific, atrocious things. And so that's just a play, that's just like something you would never do in real life. So it gives you a chance as a writer to sort of imaginatively walk around in shoes that you would never walk around in.
Right. And it's interesting you chose both of those characters because I think they both evolved the most out of any of the characters in the show. Certainly Serena coming to terms with the evil things that she had done and becoming a mother, and then Commander Lawrence having to sort of rectify this mess that he made. And also he gets to be funny too, which I'm sure helped.
Absolutely.
Rare moments of levity, right? And Bruce, I'd like to know, when you think back either on the final season or the show at large, what was the hardest scene to write from a logistical perspective, either based on constraints of weather, location, the level of rigor in the scene itself? What sticks out to you as being a particularly tough logistical scene?
Well, I think they fall into two categories, and that one is the ones that involve just Lizzie for the whole episode or something where it is a very personal and focused effort on her part, and to stay in those things are difficult, if not logistically, but very difficult. But logistically, it would be the first episode of the second season, which was shot in Fenway Park, supposedly. So and it had 200 handmaids being hung on a gallows, and we really had 200 handmaids, and we really had a gallows. And so, you know, you have to have them up there. It was very cold. Yahlin and me and Eric were rewriting something in the car. I don't remember what it was. And Yahlin had a bad jacket, so she was going to go get a better jacket. But and we were in a van. It was a terrible place to write. And then, but that was logistically, that was very difficult to pull all of those elements together. And I think in the end, Elizabeth Moss as a person in the show, our connection with her, at least, you know, as writers, and is so strong. Somehow you feel like you're kind of, you see the show in every one of her little looks, and you can walk through that over 10 years. I don't know how to explain how close I feel to her performance, but in that scene, you have a scene where it's got huge logistics, and every time she's on camera, she nails it, brings us in. So there's no feeling of the logistics. It's just about her and her face. And so I never felt overwhelmed or nervous about the logistics because of Elizabeth.
And there's a reason that her face is sort of the face of the show, those piercing blue eyes and the direct vision that she has for her goal. It's sort of like that face is the show to me. So I think what you're speaking about really speaks to Elizabeth. It's just what an amazing performer. And Eric, I'd like to know, when you think back on scripts that you've written for the show and the way they were executed on set, was there a moment that you felt shocked, even though you may have written the script, by what the actors brought to a scene? Was there a moment where someone brought an even deeper resonance that you hoped or could have dreamed that they could have brought?
So many times. It's hard now to choose, but I just, since it's the most recent, I think the execution sequence in the second to last episode on the gallows, where they're going to hang June, we had almost the whole cast there, and each cast member sort of had a moment in that sequence, especially Elizabeth Moss. And, you know, we're shooting, as Bruce was saying, you know, the physical difficulties of shooting was freezing. It was windy. It was 500 extras. She's directing the episode.
You hung your director.
We hung up. She's literally in between takes looking at an iPad about her next shot, suspended 10 feet in the air. And she had this climactic kind of monologue, rallying cry speech. And I think we did maybe 2 takes, and you know, it's Lizzie Moss. She absolutely nailed it. It sent chills down, literally and figuratively down my spine. Same thing with Ann Dow. You know, she had a few lines of dialogue in that scene where she finally calls out the godless men in power for the first time publicly in Gilead. And I remember in rehearsal, she went full out, and Josh Charles, who's no shrinking violet, literally flinched in the rehearsal because he wasn't prepared for the power that she brought to that moment. So that really is one of the most thrilling things about working on this show. We had just the most incredible cast of actors and blessed who brought so much to every moment in the script. So spoiled me for good, that's for sure.
It's definitely hard to move on from this incredible ensemble for sure. Yahlin, I'd like to talk about an episode that you wrote back in in season 2, episode 210. And it has that just grueling, very brief reunion between June and her daughter. And we talked about this last spring, and I was so impacted by what you shared as your research for writing this. I was wondering if you might share that today, because I think it's a very surprising and very powerful take on preparation for a scene that ended up being just as absolutely visceral as the research that you did. So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I remember actually Bruce saying to me as I embarked on this episode, what if June and Hannah got to see each other for a few minutes? And I was like, as a writer, I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like the fact that I got to write that scene and that it landed in my episode was probably one of like the luckiest breaks. The luckiest break I ever had was Bruce hiring me on the show. And the second luckiest break was being able to write that scene and it landing in my episode the first season I was on the show. Because
she has a husband and 3 children, so I really appreciate being both 1 and 2. So
oh yeah, no, it's the 5th and 6th luckiest thing.
Not that we're keeping score. We're not keeping score.
But so I did do a ton of research from talking to psychologists. Like basically it was going to be both a hello and goodbye scene, because they were going to be reunited, but then they would be separated. So I talked to everyone from, we have this amazing Bruce's cousin, UN international expert, and to, you know, psychologists, domestic psychologists who deal with foster care situations, who deal with this all the time. Like parents all over the world deal with this all the time, where they are saying hello and goodbye, especially in foster situations or supervised situations where they only get like a certain amount of time with their kid and then they have to go. And the international research focused on these sorts of scenes that happen, you know, in conflict zones around the world, like Liberia, Congo, and basically what happens in those scenes when, you know, parents have 10 minutes with their kids and then they're dragged out to the wall to get shot, you know, and they'll never see them again. And so one of the things that I learned was that as they're leaving, they always put a smile on their face because they want that to be the last thing that their child remembers of them before they're gone forever. And they also try to cram a lifetime's worth of advice into those few minutes that they have. So in the scene, she says to her daughter, you know, be happy, enjoy your life, love your parents, you know, and listen to them, do whatever they say, do whatever you have to do to keep yourself safe. And so the irony of it was I was doing all this research about like what happens in far-flung conflict zones. And then the week that the episode aired was the week that we were separating during the first Trump administration. We were separating parents and children along the Mexican border. So those scenes were playing out along our own border, which is something that none of us foresaw when we were first breaking the story, you know, and, you know, it just turns out that like, no matter who you are, where you are in the world, it's the same thing. It's an incredibly heart-wrenching thing. All parents who love their children, all children who love their parents they're the same. They act the same, they react the same. And that's something that, you know, we forget about in our completely polarized world, that we're all like fundamentally the same and going to react the same about being separated from people we love.
And these themes are ever more timely and present in our lives now. So the show has really reflected so much back to us. And that I really just can't tell you enough. That was such a gorgeous scene. And I can't imagine, Bruce, when you're reading this script, like, are you giving notes at all on this? Can you give notes on a scene like this? And if so, what did you say to Yahlin after reading this?
I think we give notes on everything, and we work tons on everything and together, and really are critical, and nothing is as we thought of it originally. It's all much, much, much better. I think the idea that you kind of poop it out and it's perfect is not the real world. And so I think, it's a process, and we work on it, and then we work on it with the actors. Certainly in that case, you have one actor who can't do anything really.
Right.
So you have another actor who has to do the whole thing. And so it doesn't matter what you hear research-wise. How do you translate that? So I think that we worked very, very hard on that scene. And we all were in on that research, which was fascinating, especially from the people who you hear who have gone through it, who are explaining, this is how I felt, and this is what I did, and this is what the child asked, and all that kind of stuff. But I do remember when I read it, I think that was that your second script that you wrote for the show?
Yeah.
Or your first? It was her second script, and I think you remember, I did tell you it was the best script I'd ever read.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
So yes, I think and I hope we made it better. I hope we always make it better. But but absolutely, it was fantastic. And that scene still is on every single level, from costumes to makeup to hair, all the way down to Lizzie's face and the snow and the blotchiness of her skin because it was so cold out, and the way she holds on to Nick, and the way the camera keeps her in frame when she goes down on her knees, even though it wasn't planned. That moment, that is, what do you do after you've made the best thing you can ever imagine?
Right. You have to continue to top yourself, essentially.
I can't play that game.
Eric, I'd like to know, what do you think was special about the alchemy of this writer's room? I have to imagine it's not always perfect. It's not always great. You work your way through it, but this staff feels very unique in the way you complemented each other. So tell me what you feel was special about this writing staff.
Well, it's really a credit to Bruce, because Bruce has a no assholes policy when he's hiring people. So that comes first. You're going to be spending, hopefully you're going to be hiring talented writers, but you're also going to be spending every day together in a room, and you're basically casting a family when you're hiring your writers, and you just make sure that these are people you want to spend that kind of time with. I think what's very special about this show's room is that everybody cared so much about this material. Everyone tried to bring their A game, and heart and soul put into everything. So, I've been on shows where it might not be a show you're that fond of yourself, and you're on the staff,
Right.
and you don't want to phone it in. But this show really made people so passionate about their work. I think that's really was the key, the material.
I think you'd have to, because the subject matter is just too intense. I can't imagine phoning this in on any front.
Mhm.
Bruce, I'd like to know how The Handmaid's Tale has changed the way you see yourself as a writer and what you're capable of doing. I have a feeling this tested you in a lot of ways.
Yes, this tested me in a lot of ways, and especially when you're in the position of usually writing the first and last episodes of the year. You're not even writing kind of normal Handmaid's episodes. You're kind of introducing and then dismissing seasons. That's a difficult thing as well. Writing for Elizabeth Moss was the greatest experience in terms of expanding my ability to write, because you say, okay, you can either take it from this scene, I have no idea how I'm going to write it. Absolutely none. We talk about that all the time. Instead of, we all the time said, I have no idea how I'm going to write this. And also, it's like you write something where you think, she's never going to get that. She's never going to get all those pieces in there. And it's just like a bell is ringing. She doesn't overdo it. She doesn't underdo it. And so then you can't help but say, oh, what if she can do this? I wonder if she can do this. And it isn't like you're challenging her. You're going on years and years working with this colleague. You want her to be enthusiastic and challenged and all that stuff. And I think challenging the crew, challenging the writing staff, having everybody have to bring their A game comes from that. It's almost, she had to walk on the stage really feeling like this was hard every day. That's what she liked. And I think we all like that too. You want to, so what it does, I think, is every day there's someone you know, with Lizzie, not in a bad way, but looking over your shoulder saying, is that the best you can do? Come on. I could do that easily. Come on, give me something hard.
It's like the Olympics of performance and writing all combined. And Yahlin, I'd like to know what you have learned about storytelling from Margaret Atwood. How has she left an indelible mark on the way that you, even just if you ever have time to read for pleasure, which you probably don't have a lot of time, but even when you do you have sort of Margaret's voice in your head in terms of the way you see writing and the way you perceive writing now?
Oh yeah, I mean, that was such a huge privilege to, I mean, I had done, before The Handmaid's Tale, I had done, you know, like 15, 20 years of broadcast television.
Very different from Margaret Atwood.
Very different. And then I got to work on this incredibly literary novel, and the way Bruce set it up, so much of the literariness of it continued into the show through her voiceover and through sort of small moments becoming large moments. And so there was this great thing where we got to be so novelistic in our approach, and we got to create a kind of TV that is first of all, like completely in one person's point of view, because it is the tale of this particular handmaid, but also that it could feel really novelistic. So it didn't have to be about like massive cliffhangers and people throwing other people downstairs or whatever, you know. It got to be this very sort of subtle literary, beautiful poetic text translated to screen. And so, I mean, I hope, and we kind of were given permission to do that because it was based on this novel. So it let us become novelistic. So I think all of the writers, and then including our executives, they didn't put some of what's sometimes like annoying television constraints on what we had to write, and that we got to unfold stories slowly and novelistically. And we didn't have to sort of hit like, I don't know, certain TV gimmicks that you see all the time, right? Like, it's not like we had to start every episode with a dead body and a gun, you know, like we just didn't have to do that kind of gimmicky stuff. And so, I mean, I really hope that in the rest of my career that I can, you know, continue that. But it was like because of Margaret Atwood's writing, it kind of gave us permission to tell really slow stories, to tell, you know, really kind of self-involved stories, to tell stories about a woman's psychology, you know, and that was just the biggest privilege.
And trusting the audience as she trusts her readers to be able to absorb the story and take their time to understand it. And that's what I think you don't necessarily get with broadcast TV. It's just the pressures are too intense for each episode to be a self-contained story, I think. Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple great questions. I'd like to segue to some audience folks. The first is from Cynthia, and maybe I'll direct this to Eric. Eric, how did you balance the last episodes of The Handmaid's Tale between staying true to the story with what was going on in the world socially and politically?
Great question. To be honest, I mean, for me, I never really looked to the real world to, you know, kind of invest that in whatever story we're telling. It was really just looking at where our characters were and what the situation was. And, you know, what the serendipity of this show is that there was such a parallel with what was going on in the real world. That was beyond our control, but there was this crazy alchemy that went on for the whole series. So the last few, I don't think I looked to anything in the real world, at least for the episode that I wrote. I can't speak for Bruce. He wrote the series finale, but I wrote the penultimate, and that was really just like all of the storylines converging finally, and some of them concluding in that episode.
Thank you. And actually, the next question is a bit of a follow-up to that, and I'll pose this to Bruce. From Jackie, she says, while watching the series, I couldn't help but reflect on the parallels happening between today and our country and what we saw on screen. Can you please share your perspective as creators on The Handmaid's Tale being a cautionary tale?
Thanks, Jackie. Being a cautionary tale, I think, I don't know if it's a cautionary tale, and I think you are exactly right in what you say, which is you see the parallels in the world around us. I think if we look to make parallels, I'm not good enough to do that. Honestly, without it seeming clumsy, without it seeming too on the nose, I couldn't do that. We just follow the show, and I think you leave it to the audience in the biggest way possible to make the connections to the world. And I think it's what was the second part of her question? Excuse me.
Oh, I think it's just sort of what we see on screen being a cautionary tale versus what.
And so I think you absolutely want to put things on television that make people think, oh my gosh, what if I did that, or what if I was in that situation? And I think in that way, what you're trying to do is put them in bad situations so they realize how they'll feel. So if they get in a similar situation, they might have thought it through. So in that way, it's cautionary. But I feel so much like it's not our part of the process. I mean, all of us kind of on this call, you're laying it out. And if there was something cool that you were trying to tell the audience that you're trying to hide in this, tell them the cool thing directly. Don't try to hide it in that. So, tell this directly and that directly. So I think that there wasn't that Vermeer feeling that we were painting over something ghostly underneath. I don't feel like it at all. I feel like we were making a very solid, grounded story about this woman. And what you took away from it was wholly or 99% based on you.
Thank you so much. And that makes a lot of sense, actually. And Yahlin, what would you say is the best piece of advice you ever received about writing that you have employed in your career? And this can be as granular as how to pitch something, or how to get hired in a room that you want to work in, or even just sitting down to write. Is there something that has stuck with you that you have found to be very useful to you?
Well, let's see, two things that come to mind right away. One about being in the writer's room and one about writing is that I think has evolved over, as I said, 25 years of writing television, is that I've learned just that to be specific, the more specific you are, the more universal something is. So, I think that these stories generally, and stories on television, they really thrive with specificity. So, when something is feeling kind of fake or wrong when I'm watching television, it's usually because you can feel that scene or that moment is coming from the writers having watched 100 other scenes or moments like it and is doing a version of that, rather than really digging into themselves and thinking about like what is a very specific kind of wound or experience that I, in my individuality, have experienced going through the world. And I think the more you are sort of honest about and authentic to the specificity of your experience or how you empathize with other people, the more true a moment will feel. I think that all of us have had the experience in watching TV feeling like that feels too TV, that feels too, and so I think that that's like a great habit to break out of. And, that's something certainly Bruce taught me through, when I started writing for Handmaids. The other thing that I also have to attribute to both Bruce and Eric is that when I came into the Handmaid's room, and again, I was like a latecomer because I was a season 2 ad, was that when people were pitching, if you didn't agree with a pitch, you didn't have to say no. Like, you never had to say, like, we're not doing that. I don't like that idea. That idea doesn't work, because they would never do that. They just sort of let it go, And what you realize is that the good ideas, you'll keep coming back to them and they'll come to the surface. But writers in a writer's room are so sensitive. And I certainly was, where like, if you pitch something and the showrunner says no, or everyone stomps on it, it makes you feel bad. And that feeling of badness, it takes you out of the flow of trying to break a story. And instead you're just like sitting there kind of nursing your ego injury instead of working. So, I think it's really, in a writer's room, it's really incumbent to like try not to, and I mean, of course, it's like the ideal is to make everyone happy and feel safe and be super productive and thrive every single minute that they're in the room. And that's kind of an impossible ideal, you know, but that's what you go for. But you know, I think it's you know, like I do remember one instance where I was like, okay, I never do this, but I do have to say that we can't do that. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, I remember that day because I've like remembered it every day since then. I was like, did I have to actually put my foot down that one time? Because
I really hurt my feelings, Yahlin, when you said that.
It wasn't your idea.
Well, you can also be kind and defend your position without hurting feelings, I think. I think there's a balance, of course.
Yeah.
I'm sure you were quite nice. You don't strike me as someone who's going to be very cruel to someone in the room, Yahlin.
But I do appreciate
we have another audience question from Melanie, and maybe I'll direct this to Bruce. Melanie says, I've read some Handmaid's Tale scripts. They seem unique in digging deeply into the emotional lives of the characters rather than just describing what's going on. Can you talk about how you developed this style of script writing for Bruce?
It's a very good question, and I think I'm very fussy about the scripts, and I really think of them not so much for the public, but really to communicate with the cast and the crew. That's really who our audience is. So a lot of it is written to give the audience of the reader a sense of what I'm trying to communicate to the audience. That won't be apparent. Now, this show is particular. She doesn't say very much. Most of the stuff she has going on is her resisting showing her fear, resisting. So it's just particular that in this thing, without that scaffolding of she's feeling this, she's feeling this, she's feeling this, you wouldn't be able to follow it because it's like it would all be her standing still, her standing still, her standing still. So what you're trying to do is kind of, I think what I'm trying to do is break it down into what step each little piece is going to take and why it's there. And that once again is Elizabeth, is knowing that if I don't put it there, she's going to ask for it. And if I put it there, I'm going to get dividends of a great performance. So I think that I hope that the scripts evolved with the needs of the cast and especially the crew in mind. So if you see us put a sound in or put a prop in or something like that, we are talking to Charles, or we are talking to Sheila, or we are talking to Lou or someone else in sound. And so you're specifically, oh, okay, I should put this in so that person knows. So I think in a world where they don't talk much and it's a lot of subtext, either they're talking in voiceover, or you got to tell them, or they don't know what's going on. And I think early in my career, I would honestly say I wrote scripts that I thought were brilliant, and I didn't put any of that stuff in, and no one got what the hell I was doing. I thought I was great, and no one could get it at all until I started to hold hands much more in terms of this is going to this and this is lead. Because the answer usually with the script is, oh, it's going to be in the performance. If it, almost always it's going to be a better version of what you have in the performance, but you got to put in something that tells people what that performance is going to tell you.
It's a map, essentially. It sounds like what you're saying. It's very, very interesting.
It's plans for a building. It's not a building.
That's right.
Yeah.
And before we wrap,
thank you to that person for reading our scripts. That's so
I know.
nice.
Thank you. That was extremely, extremely insightful of that person. Oh, we do have another audience question from Mike. Mike says, when you're working with writing adaptations, what are the core issues and opportunities that come with translating something that's so internal and literary into a long form format? And maybe Eric, you can address that.
Well, this novel in particular, of course, it's a brilliant, beautiful literary novel. It's so interior. Nick, I think if he speaks at all, it's like 10 words in the novel. So, and there's very little plot in the novel. Bruce used up in the very first episode of the series, not the first season, the first episode. Most of the plot was in that episode. What really struck me the first time I read Bruce's pilot, and I hadn't read the book, I went back and forth all the time. He captured the vibe, the flavor, the tone of Margaret Atwood so beautifully. And he broke convention. He used voiceover. You're not supposed to use voiceover. That's a so-called rule. He had flashbacks within flashbacks. You're in June's flashback where she sees Moira, and then you flash back to them again, even beyond that. So I don't even know if you remember that, Bruce. It's just like he captured the flavor of the novel, and as Yahlin was saying before, the feel of it. Even the outlines were written differently than typical outlines for this specific story. They felt like the show. They felt like you were being brought through a very lyrical, kind of poetic journey with these characters. And that was something that Bruce established from the beginning, and we all kind of just copied what he was doing. So at least for this specific show, I think it was just capturing her voice was the most important thing.
Well, thank you so much. We have to wrap now, but I really want to wish all of you congratulations. What a stunning achievement in wrapping the series. I know people are still watching and still processing, so I hope people continue to discover the magic of The Handmaid's Tale. And we'd like to thank Hulu for sponsoring today's conversation. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful questions and for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey.